without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Um, Please welcome, and we're so happy to have you today, Melissa Bao. Melissa is the founder of Via Gelato. If you didn't know, Via is a popular dessert shop in Kanoki, known for their creative and unique gelato and sorbet flavors like Okinawan sweet potato, mango float, and my personal favorite, green tea Oreo. Via started as a food truck where Melissa was able to launch that truck and move into a brick and mortar store within 1 year. Melissa is a graduate of Punahou and Creighton University. And again, please help me welcome Melissa.
Thanks, Carson. I'll take your lead.
Okay, so to start off the questions, Melissa, tell us about where you're joining from and a little bit about your childhood growing up in Hawaii.
Sorry, where I grew up. What did you say?
Or or your childhood in Hawaii.
Oh, well, I grew up here, and we first lived in Waipahu, and that was really far from town where my parents and went to work, and then we went to school. Um, and then we moved to Moanalua into an apartment, and we all crammed inside. And I remember like living in the living room with my brother, like on bunk beds. And yeah, I mean, I think those times were really tough for my parents because I definitely remembered like finances being like a real struggle, and like we we really like didn't have a whole lot to eat growing up. So I think that's kind of why I'm in food, because all of my memories of like food that was created by somebody really thoughtful, or something that was really important to that person for maybe special occasions or maybe like at a friend's house, that those memories were really, really strong for me. And so I think that's why I'm really into food, and that's why I'm in the business that I'm in.
Wow, definitely. And then moving on to our next question, after high school, you went to college and you received a doctorate in physical therapy. And I just wanted to ask sort of what drew you to this field?
Well, I was in physical therapy because my parents thought that that would be like a really stable career for me. So their ideas of what they thought were acceptable were all kind of under the umbrella of what they think is really stable. So I did go to school and got my doctorate in physical therapy, but although I was good at it, it wasn't really my life path or like my choice. And so I had decided to pursue what I wanted to do, which was food. And for them, that was like really scary and like, I want to say like shameful, because to go from like, in their minds, to go from a professional, I guess, profession, I guess, like professional job, to something that they thought didn't require any skill whatsoever. They just thought like that was like so horrible. But I mean, to be honest, like I think that there's a lot of prejudice when it comes to um, different professions, different niches, different markets. And I guess like yeah, I think that, if whoever's close to you is not familiar with that market, it's difficult to expect that they're going to be able to support you a lot, even just emotionally, right? Like I don't think everybody's like, oh yeah, great job, So, like a lot of people who were in my family, they just like had no idea why I was doing it, and it just like didn't make any sense to them. So I had to build kind of my own network of people who really believed in the vision and like thought it was a cool idea.
Definitely. And it's really admirable that you were able to flourish in both fields. So moving on to, outside of the umbrella, tell us about the origin story of gelato. Where did you get the idea to make and sell? your, I guess, your hit business from?
Well, I was living in New York at the time and I was strategizing my move back to Hawaii. And so I just kind of thought, like, this is the perfect time because I'm uprooting myself in terms of where I'm living. And so I thought it was a great time to jump into a profession that I wanted to go into that I felt like was really interesting to me. So I started small, like you said. I started with a truck and I chose gelato because when I was experimenting in New York, I am capable of cooking a lot of different things because, like I told you before, I have all these really strong memories. And I guess I'm just lucky in that I can virtually make anything that I've eaten in the past. So, because the memory is so strong, like I know exactly what's in it. And so, if I go out to eat, like I can tell you pretty much like how they made it and what's in it, and I could make it for you, which is really a great thing to be able to have that knowledge and then kind of put your own spin on it. So, to narrow it down, I didn't want to open a business that was going to be, I don't know how to put this, but really hard. Like I wanted something that I could actually do and that was executable. So I chose gelato because when I was experimenting, one, a lot of people love it, and two, it allows me a lot of leeway in terms of like what kind of flavors I can make, which kind of was kind of like the perfect alignment in terms of like moving back to Hawaii because when I was living away, I realized how much I had taken for granted and how special having grown up here is, and all of the things that mean a lot to me and are special to me.
Oh, definitely. And I was just about to bring that up, you know. I was doing a little bit of research and like, wow, she can recreate like any flavor that she's previously tasted. And off of that tangent, you know, were there any flavors that it's like, oh, you've experienced something from another place and you just had to make it? Like, what flavor would that have been if there was one for you?
Yeah, there was a lot actually. So the most popular flavor, the fierce chocolate, that was something that I had eaten versions of. I mean, not called fierce chocolate, but like I had eaten versions of chocolate in Italy, and like their chocolate ice cream or gelato, whatever you want to call it, is very different from what I was able to eat in America. And so I'd like go to the store and like kind of like try other like ice creams and go to shops and whatnot. And I think what I noticed was the chocolate that I had there was just so much deeper in flavor. And a lot of the chocolate ice creams that were available in the supermarket at the time were just kind of like chocolate milk, like not really the same body of like eating a chocolate bar. And so that's kind of where I started is fierce chocolate, and I made that one as my first flavor. And then another flavor that I thought was really cool was there's an ice cream shop in New York called the Chinatown ice cream shop, and that one serves all kinds of Asian influenced flavors. And so when I had their black sesame, I kind of thought like, oh, again, this is not really a black sesame is such a strong, unique flavor that we all recognize. And I felt like their version wasn't really, I don't know, like really intense. And so I just wanted to make a version for us that was really tasting strongly of black sesame. And I don't know, I guess like other people who eat it, they feel that sort of same appreciation and connection because they're like, oh, somebody who understands me. I like that flavor too. So
Definitely. And I feel like it's super interesting how you're able to not only, you know, pick up on the different tastes and, you know, different niches from outside of the country, but also, local to home. That's always wonderful. And then I also wanted to ask, when you're first starting your business through, running a food truck and, just first starting off your business, how did you acquire your first customers or try and get them to try out your new gelato?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think I was just in order to start the business, I had to meet a lot of people. And so I think, like, you know how people say starting is really hard for them? Like, it's really hard for them to talk about their idea with people and to like meet new people. But I think all of that was really important in order just to get, you know, my first customers, right? Because if no one knows about it until like the first day that you open, that's a really short runway. So I had a really long runway in the sense that when I I started like building the truck. So I met all of these people who taught me building techniques, body work techniques to like actually like clean up the truck. And then they kind of told other people, like, there's this girl who's like building a truck and it's so different. Like, and it just became like a topic of like conversation. And I think, like, when it's not just you telling that story, it's like all of these people who you've met and are connected to, and they're telling the story to their family and their friends. Like, it just grows kind of organically that way. So by the time I opened it, I think it was kind of like not a big surprise for people because they're like, yeah, you've been working on that for a really long time and I want to try it out. So,
And definitely, I think, growing the truck, that's a severe understatement. You went from, working, just going from place to place to a brick and mortar in just a year. That's pretty amazing. So when did you know that you're ready to move into a physical store location? Or like also when did you, I guess, know from a business point aspect and also intuitively?
oh, well, I think it has to do with like I had a plan from the start. So even though I started with a truck and that didn't mean that that was the only thing that I wanted to do. And I guess just from my experiences in New York, when you're established as a certain sort of thing, the longer you are that thing. So let's say it's a truck, the harder it is for people to see that you're anything else but that. So I wanted to definitely transition to a more permanent place for all kinds of reasons. I mean, like to grow, to be able to have like employees who are all under the same roof and not like in a mobile sense. In order, I just always wanted to have a brick and mortar. So that was kind of the goal. And I wanted to transition to that as quickly as possible so that people weren't puzzled. Like, no, you're not a brick and mortar, you're a truck. And like the brick and mortar, that's not the real thing. The real thing is the truck. So yeah, that's why I started that pretty quickly. But then I was also really lucky. I mean, I had so many people who wanted to be customers and wanted to support, and yeah.
Awesome. And then stemming from that, what are the sort of different marketing tactics that you utilize when you again switched from, your truck, your home base to, a brick and mortar?
Did you say what are my marketing tactics?
Oh, what marketing tactics do you find most effective in reaching new members in your business startup when you switched from, working the truck to your brick and mortar station?
Oh, okay. Well, when I started, I I sent out my menu through social media. So, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. But then back then, it was Instagram wasn't what it is today. So, like, I was able to reach all of my followers, and like it wasn't like tons of competition in terms of like on people's feeds and whatnot. And I think like every year feeds get more and more cluttered, right? Because we can't like, there's no way you could scroll through everything that you're interested in or people who you're following. It's just so many. And so I don't know if like that marketing tactic is the best now. I mean, we definitely still do invest in our Instagram and post a lot, but yeah, we've had to do different things. So I think back then I relied primarily on social media. Now I really want our customers to subscribe to our newsletter, because in that way I have their email addresses and I can like tell them stories directly to them and not kind of wait and hope that we show up on their Instagram feed. And because it's a newsletter, I think like the whole the whole format is totally different, right? Like for Instagram, you just kind of want to look at a nice picture or a fun video, something satisfying to watch like quickly and then kind of move on. Whereas a newsletter, they don't allow me to post video, which is fine. I just do photos. I just, try to take really nice photography. And then I kind of spend a little bit more time in terms of like storytelling aspects. So, which oddly, like it sounds so long format. It sounds like I'm like writing a novel every week, but I'm really not. It's not like that long, but it does forge, I think, a closer connection with people, which is ultimately what people love, right? Like they don't necessarily want to be marketed to all the time, but they do want to feel like close and in the know and like kind of privy to stories that you might not have known if you hadn't subscribed.
Definitely. I think, even in a time of disconnect right now, with the pandemic going on, that interpersonal communication is something that's important and treasured, and knowing that people know the story behind it. So definitely. And I just wanted to quickly ask also, if you could walk us through some of your planning and, what was sort of involved when you were opening up your first location, or what were some things that you noticed, problems that occurred, or what went really well as far as planning?
Ooh, that's kind of a lot.
Oh, I'm
No, no,
sorry.
no, it's
That's
okay.
kind of a lot.
um, Well, I think a business plan is a good thing. So, like everybody who goes to business school, I think we're kind of taught how to the basics, like what does everything mean? And like I'm sure everyone takes like courses in accounting, like all of that's really you do, right? Like you all are required to take accounting. Is that correct? Yeah. So I think that's all like really good because at the end of the day, like, not that you are personally going to be doing all the accounting. I don't, but I do personally analyze the accounting every month. And I use kind of like our P&L and our balance sheet and our cash flow to figure out how well we're doing and like opportunities for us, and then also ways to give feedback to my team. Because I mean, most people on my team have no interest in looking at finance statements. And so it's kind of up to me to kind of like let them know how they're doing in terms of like what they're working on. And then that directly correlates with what I can reward people with, right? Like it's not random. So, and we do need to continue to grow in order to like, even if we just kept the same, because I haven't technically grown Via Gelato in a while. Like it's just still one location, but we are still internally growing where like a ton of our employees are really long lasting employees. Like there's people who have worked with us for like 4 or 5 years. And then, there's a bunch of people who are kind of in like the 2 year mark. And it's actually very rare for us to newly hire. So we don't have a whole lot of new hires. But what I'm trying to say is that these people who are growing with the company and spending their life and spending their time, they want to get paid more and more and more, right? And they also want to grow themselves. So, in order for that to happen, we have to grow to facilitate the growth of like everybody who's in the company. If that makes any sense. But did I answer your question? Business plan? Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah,
good.
definitely. I
Okay.
guess while you're taking your courses, you're sort of overseeing all of the classes that I have to take and, comparing it to, okay, like expansion or, just even work culture, making sure that internally, the employees are satisfied. And I feel that's a great reflection to, how Via Gelato is doing so great that the workers, there's just so much longevity within how long they're staying. And you mentioned expansion. So at one point you had a store at Ward. I was wondering, could you talk to us about your decision to sort of expand from there?
Could I talk about what did you say?
Or so sort of talk about your decision to expand from your previous
Oh,
location at Ward.
so I had decided to expand because again, like a lot of our employees were like, we feel like it would be great to expand, we should expand. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting culturally. There's always going to be like a ton of people telling you, no, don't start. Like, when you're like starting your business, I think there's a lot of people who will say, like, it's too risky, don't start. But then, like, ironically, when it comes to expansion, everybody's like, of course you have to expand. So it's kind of like, it doesn't really like make logical sense because expansion is kind of like you starting because you're starting a new thing, you're doing, I don't know, it's never exactly the same. I think that this is very, very rare where you're just like, I'm just going to do the exact same thing and it'll be double, like double the profits and double the benefits. It's generally like not like that. I feel like it's kind of exponential in terms of the expectations and like the amount of work that has to be done. So anyway, I definitely listen to a lot of people and they're like, you should expand. You like, why wouldn't you want to? And so I tried it. But for me, it was too much. Like it brought in like kind of like I said, like double the work. Doubling my work is like way more work than I can personally handle. And I definitely have a team. Like it's not like I don't have a team and I do everything by myself. I'm not one of those entrepreneurs who like solo flyers, but just so many like things that connect back to me for it was too much. And so I think like I don't know. I think definitely when people say expansion is always good, like I kind of think in the back of my head, like I don't really agree with that. I think like choosing your like what you're interested in, what you want to do and the way that you think your life you want it to look like, I think that that's really, really important. So yeah.
Awesome. And sort of, I also wanted to ask, what are some skills that you include on your LinkedIn and your graphic design and also video
Oh, yeah.
editing that coupled with your time in New York? Um, that you've created more of like an urban sort of chic aesthetic, and then that's also commonly seen in stores and through via marketing. So I was wondering if you could speak more on those brand elements and sort of aesthetic designs, perhaps that you got influenced by.
Yeah, I think like aesthetics is really important to brand and branding, because it's humans are very visual. They take in most of their information through their eyes. So, what I hear a lot of people who I work with sometimes struggle with is they're like, but there's a sign, but like I told you this. And so, why do you still think it's this, which I've already told you? And there's like words that say this. So, I think like it all just stems back to we're very, very visual. And a lot of people who I work with are surprised that people need like pictures almost for everything or a video. But I feel like that's kind of part of the course for humans. And like that's how we learn, that's what we're attracted to. So I think the sooner you can kind of get over those questions of like why are we like this and just kind of like embrace it, like humans are visual, so let's like spend a lot of like money and effort and time into like visually what is the person experiencing. So that's kind of the reason why behind like all of the aesthetics. And if you're not, I think like if you're not innately that kind of design minded person, there's a lot of designers, graphic designers, like interior designers who are really, really good at what they do. And so I think like spending resources on them is really, really important, which maybe some people would not even think about, right? Because I mean, I just actually spoke on like a women's panel and they were talking about like what I see the future being for women. And I think that I'm hoping that people realize that there aren't gender biased professions, like it's not like you have to be a woman or a gay man to appreciate aesthetics. Like, but I do hope that people like weight those types of experiences and resources more so than they have in the past. Like, an accountant or a financial advisor, like that's all stuff that people are like, oh, yeah, you absolutely have to have. But people kind of like think of like branding, marketing as like, oh, like that's like the leftover stuff. But when you really look at all successful and like even like really large companies, so much of their resources are directed towards branding and marketing and like how you connect with people. So, and that's like another part of it where like it all has to kind of make sense, right? Like you can't sell something or have a product purported to be a certain thing, but it looks totally different, you know? Like people just do not like that distance. They feel like it's really dishonest. They're not loyal to that. So I think it's like really important to, if you don't have that within you, to find others who that is their strong point and reward them well for what they do.
Definitely. And another question I have for you about, being a business leader, what's a common stigma or misconception found in the mindsets of, local students, student entrepreneurs that have this idea of being successful locally versus being successful, out in the mainland nationally? What are sort of your thoughts on this? I know you touched a little bit on, gender and matching sort of people's perceptions of the occupations. So I just
Oh,
wanted to know, what is your take on students that are a little shy or uncertain to the idea of being successful locally or being successful more on a national level?
So I read that question that you had written, and I needed like a little bit more background, I think, because I don't know what the common perception is. Can you kind of like share that with me?
I think a lot of local students here in Hawaii, they think it's hard to sort of break out of, our shell, sort of like on the islands to maybe like, again, expansion more to a national level, I think for Hawaii kids especially.
Well, I think like, I mean, I don't really know if I fully understand the question, but I was approached by like an accelerator to expand my business to the mainland. And when I talked with that person, I told them all the reasons why I didn't think that it was a sound business model. And I guess like maybe a summary is just like we do live in the middle of an ocean. So like if you have to transport goods, like if you're making something here, a lot of the things that we're getting don't come from Hawaii. I mean, we definitely try to use local as much as possible, but realistically, there's a limit to how many like mangoes a human can process and then like store in order just to like make that like mango float. So it's not that simple to just kind of think like you have a great business model. We love that flavor. People in the mainland will love it. So therefore, like you should be able to do that and like you should want to expand. So just logistically, I think like it has to make a lot of sense. And maybe folks who are really good at that and have had like a lot of practice are people who are based in Asia and who sell most of their goods overseas, like say to America or to Europe. Like China's like a great example. They make, I mean, so many different things, but let's just take one thing, which is cups. Like the cups that we all use for to-go containers, like they make like pretty much like all that packaging for us. And I mean, they're not feeling held back in terms of like, reaching out to clients like halfway across the world. But at the same time, like, maybe there's somebody who is financing that risk and maybe that they have like a lot more infrastructure that they can kind of rely on. Maybe it's a different culture too. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think maybe if your culture is to be more on the conservative side to take on less risk, that's not a bad thing. Kind of like how we talked about expansion always being like a good thing. It's not like I there's so many avenues of business. There's so many like jobs or like entrepreneurship, I guess, like endeavors that you could take being a conservative person and kind of having that sort of attitude because there's a whole lot of people who feel just like you. There's a whole lot of people who, I mean, not you, Carson, but like if anyone here is like, yeah, like I'm like not a big risk taker. That doesn't appeal to me. I want to do entrepreneurship, but I don't want to take on a whole lot of risk. Like I think that there's definitely some sort of Venn diagram for that.
And in addition to, because that risk, it is a big fear that a lot of entrepreneurs have. So, when you're going through and just taking it all in, the risk, I guess, the joy of seeing the business flourish, what motivates you to keep going every day when you have this balance of your personal life, um, navigating and pioneering via gelato, what again keeps you going and motivates you?
Um, I'm kind of just an intrinsically motivated person. Like I'm really rarely like I don't want to do anything. Like usually want to do something, and whether that's with Thea or whether that's it's like something outside of my life, like I think I don't really have that problem. There's just so many things to do and like experience and try. And I kind of want to, I have the opposite problem. I'm like, I want to try all of that. Like, all of that sounds awesome. So, and I like new things. So I like to like learn new things all the time. So maybe what's the latest thing I learned? I'm learning how to golf, and I am learning more and more about videography and photography. So I've always like had to do it, but I've been taking some like classes, and actually the Made in Hawaii people like reached out to me and they're like, "Oh, we love your videos. Can you like create the videos for Made in Hawaii?" And I was like, I'm so not a professional. Like I just do this for, I mean, like I do it for Via, but I've never really been like contracted or hired by anyone to do their photography or their videography. So I just felt like that was really like a pleasant surprise, because I do know that a lot of people look at art, like look at the photos and look at the videos and they're like, wow, that looks so amazing. And it's for the goal of getting people to want to come to visit us. But it was really a nice compliment when hear like, and sometimes like I'll just run into other people on the street and they'll be like, I'm a photographer and I've watched your videos and I think they're like so well done. So it feels really good.
Definitely. I think the Via Gelato visuals are certainly very appealing. And then, oh, really quick, moving on to our audience Q&A. So a
Yeah.
question from Kayla. She mentioned a lot of the flavors at Via Gelato seem to be drawn from the cuisine of local ethnic groups. So pandan, halpia, almond cookies. Why do you feel that it's important to incorporate and showcase local influence flavors as a small business in Hawaii?
I think it's just important to me personally. So, and luckily I'm from here and there's a whole lot of people, like thousands and thousands of people who are like, yeah, I agree. Like this is really important to me too. So, I mean, in I guess like I'm just very lucky that I think very similarly to a lot of our customers and our audience. But yeah, I mean, those flavors are what I grew up eating and loving and remembering. And so when I moved away, just the accessibility of that and the way that people would treat it as, oh, this is exotic, like let me explain to you what black sesame is because you never had it and you might not like it, like that sort of, it's very different when I was living there as a minority and then moving here as like pretty much the majority, like the majority of people have that flavor, memory, and love it. So that's why I think it's important because it's, our culture.
Oh, really quick, audience members, please add your questions in the chat. And oh, question from Chelsea. How did you come up with the name Via Gelato? That's a good one.
So via means street in Italian. And like at the time, I was going to open a truck. And so I had like actually called up like two friends from high school, and one of them had already started a business. Like he had actually done several businesses by that time already. And so I really liked kind of just bouncing things off of him because his responses were always really interesting to me. And what he had said was one of his like big things of advice was like only focus on your core group that you want to be your customers at Via. Don't think about satisfying like every single person because you're going to lose your identity that way. And so we were talking about like like the name. And again, like I had come back home from New York. So I originally was thinking like, oh, like it has to have like Hawaii in the name or aloha or island or something that like attaches itself to the name to really directly link like what we're doing, which is showcasing local flavors. And he was like, you don't have to do that. Like we're all from Hawaii. Like you don't need to like tell us that because we already know. Like we can like experience that through the visuals, through like, you know, the flavors. Like you don't have to have it in the name. And so that was kind of interesting to me. And I was like, okay, so like what do you think you would be drawn to like in a name? And he was like, well, I feel like I just will know when you say it. So it's kind of like naming like my dog. Like we just kind of like came up with a whole bunch of names. And then that was the one that people just seemed to like the most. And then the story behind it, like I said, is that Via means the street. And I was opening a truck. So it kind of made like sense, like in terms of like the street.
Oh, wow. Next question. Oh, Sophia brought up how, oh, that you're a physical therapist before. So in what ways has that education sort of enhanced your ability to run Via Gelato or help strengthen your entrepreneurial mindset? Even though if it was from a different study, how did being a physical therapist help sort of prep you in a way?
I think like, I mean, I went to school, and when you go through professional schooling, you got like a doctorate and that kind of like a clinical thing, there's all of these hoops that you have to do. Like there's all these classes that you have to take, and there's all of these tests that you have to prove yourself that you've gotten to this point. We spend minimum a year in internships. It's actually like longer than that. But I think that that all kind of helped me to have experienced something with a lot of structure, which I think sometimes when people think of entrepreneurship, they think of it as great. I don't have to have a lot of structure. I want to be an entrepreneur because I don't want the structure. Or if like they think of it as I am an entrepreneur and there is no structure. Like I am my own boss, right? So I have to do all the motivating. I have to create all of the systems and the operations and like know everything that's going on in the business. And I think like there's really something good to be said about structure and about having like achieved like step by step by step by step to get someplace. So for me, I think it was a good experience because the way I look at our industry is we're really food and beverage. We're really lacking in terms of structure and in terms of like giving it some tangible sort of, I don't want to say hierarchy, but like pathway to growth. So people don't value it as much. But I think that hospitality is not easy, and it is not just something that like anybody can learn. And a lot of people think that because they're like, oh, well, my first job was at a cafe or a restaurant or like serving food or something. But really, like hospitality done well is definitely a skill. And it's something that we try to teach in incremental levels, very similar to the way that I would teach somebody if you were interning with me how to treat in physical therapy. Like we would start the basics and then kind of layer on top of that. And I think people really appreciate that, to be honest. Like people like pathways, like, you know, here's a path that you can get better and succeed. Like most people are really, really into that. So,
Wow. And another question that we have from sort of a mix of different people. if you want to try to create a lot of different things, how do you pace yourself and how do you sort of,
Mm.
I guess, jump through the hurdles that um, compile from wanting to try different things and sort of diversify what you want to do as a business owner?
Um, I think maybe surrounding myself with people who are different from me. So I have a lot of team members who are not, we are not the same. Like I have some really long standing team members who are like very slow and steady. Like they don't do things like impulsively. They kind of warm up to ideas after maybe like weeks of discussing them. And I really appreciate their viewpoint because it just helps us to execute it as a team, whatever like the new idea is. So one way that I pace myself is I'm not by myself. So I can't just do it really fast and pivot and just do whatever I want because like I feel like it. I have like an entire team that, we're along for the ride together. And so just through so many years being together, we know how to respect one another's like style and differences, but yet at the same time ride the same boat, so to speak, to like the destination. Um, and then just personally, like I try to set goals that I want so that I don't get too distracted with like tons of new stuff that I want to do. Like, one of my goals is I do want to try new things at least once a week. But, I have like a whole list of like other stuff that I have to do too. So I can't just like not do those. I don't know. I guess I'm like a really responsible person. Like I have to do my list first, then I can play, like do other stuff. So,
Awesome. And Jessica wants to know, you can identify and recreate, any flavor, but were there any flavors that were sort of giving you a hard time or were a little bit difficult to recreate?
oh my gosh, yeah. Um, well, so mango float, it seems like very simple, but that was one of the ideas of one of our team members, and she grew up in the Philippines. So I did not grow up in the Philippines, and I have had many a mango dessert, but like I really wanted to make it the way that she remembers it and identifies with it. So we did a lot of versions with that, starting just with the dessert itself and then eating it. Like she made her version that her grandma made. And like we kind of like talked about it. And I talked about like what is really important to her. Like, because I was really surprised that the dominant flavor in mango float is graham crackers, actually, like that kind of really wholesome brown sugar graham cracker flavor. And then the mangoes equal to, but definitely not above. So a lot of like mistakes that we were making, thankfully, just together, where there were people on the team who work in the kitchen who are very, very comfortable, and they're like, okay, mango float, we'll just like make a mango gelato and then we'll mix in like the mangoes and then we'll just like throw some graham crackers in there like inside. But when we had her dessert and like listening to her talk about it, like the striations and the layers were so important to her. That's what she thinks is like the quintessential mango float. So even though there's people who are very, very experienced in the kitchen and she doesn't do any kitchen stuff, like it was still really kind of challenging to tease out from another person's perspective what is really emotionally important to you. Because I think like she had never really thought about it. She's like, I just love it. Like, I don't know, like, all the components that are important to it. So that was a really interesting experience. And I can definitely feel for people who are, trying to kind of get out of their own comfort of what they know and doing something like for somebody else. Like that's definitely challenging. But the hardest thing for us to do, oh my God, we did like literally 20 plus versions was sugar free because sugar chemically is what gives pastry its structure. Like you can't just, I mean, I get like people who don't want to be consuming sugar, like they're looking at it from a health perspective, but it's almost virtually impossible to make like ice cream or pastry and for it to behave exactly like an ice cream that has sugar in it. That was so hard. We tried so many times. It's just like, oh my God, it's not working.
Definitely. And as a final wrap-up question, our audience wants to know, what are your future plans for Via Gelato?
Oh, I mean, I tried having a second store. I didn't really enjoy that lifestyle so much for me. So I really like where we're at right now. It seems very like microcosmic to think in these terms, but like we've really benefited from what I've invested. So what I wanted to do maybe like way before the pandemic is I wanted a team that was really engaged, like engaged with each other, like just love what they do. Um, and it took a while to kind of like get that because at first we thought, oh, it's the people. Like you need certain kinds of people to be engaged, and it's just innate. Like they're just innately engaged people. But actually, I found out that that's not the case, that everyone starts off at a company or a place like as a newbie, and you, I think you have like a window of time in which to kind of create that bond with each other before they just look at it as like, this is like not a top priority because I mean, as you guys know, like you guys are so busy. You have so many things that are competing for priorities in your life. So I was investing like a lot of my time, money, and energy in just building these pathways and like operations for people to kind of just gradually get more and more engaged and more rewarded. And then the pandemic hit, and it was just so fortuitous for us that we had such a close team like already. So nobody was fired, like I kept everybody on payroll. And I mean, still to this day, like the same people work there, and we're just not, thank God, we're just like not experiencing like the stress to the degree that other people are, where they had to like lay everyone off. And then now they're trying to start all over from the beginning and like gather a team and trying to rally a team during the hardest, most stressful like conditions. It's just like, it's just really hard, you know? So yeah, I think to answer your question, my goals are very like like in within our company. And I want to see our folks grow and succeed and feel really rewarded. And yeah, that's pretty much what I'm looking for.
Melissa, thank you so much for sharing your entrepreneurship journey and also, learning about the background of Via Gelato and how culturally significant it is, with all the different flavors and just how you link it back to, home and even, your business and entrepreneurial tactics, how you've pioneered through your successful business, Via Gelato. We just once again wanted to say thank you so much.